Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to this introductory presentation on Solar App Plus, the emerging U.S. permitting solution. Solar App Plus is a tool that's being developed by the National Renewable Energy Lab in partnership with UL and many of the other partners shown here on the screen. On average, it takes a week or longer to receive approval on a new solar project in the United States. Until now. Solar App Plus standardizes requirements and checks for safety and compliance on the spot to instantly catch code issues, typos, and errors. Overall, it cuts down the permitting process by at least 5 to 10 business days. This means less waiting and more solar. It was created through a rigorous collaborative process by some of the leading subject matter experts in the field. And best of all, it's being offered for free to local governments across the country. Before we get into the details of the platform, we want to highlight that local governments and rooftop solar are allies in the desire for safety, quality, environmental outcomes, and economic development. Above all, Solar App Plus aims to improve install quality and inspection records, which is why it is recognized as the gold standard for permitting. The tool's permitting specifications are based on model building, electrical, and fire codes and are cross-referenced to the leading permitting guidebooks from California, New York, and the SolSmart National Simplified Permit Guidelines for residential PV arrays. Local resilience is another goal that Solar App Plus shares with your community. Blackouts are becoming increasingly common as extreme weather causes electricity demand to skyrocket, while at the same time damaging the aging electric grid. Climate change-driven disasters like more intense storms and hurricanes only increase this risk. So, some communities are looking for new ways to ensure that vulnerable people and infrastructure can withstand power outages. They're installing solar panels and home batteries that continue working when the larger grid goes dark. Solar App Plus can help accelerate the installation of solar and very soon solar plus storage and bring these technologies to more people, overall allowing for a safe, reliable, and clean electric grid. As far as economic development, during difficult economic periods, solar has remained popular, meaning that it can bring in revenue when other industries cannot. Automated permitting has the potential to increase the number of permits processed, which will increase building department revenue without straining staff resources. And lastly, American cities and towns are uniquely positioned to take bold action to fight climate change. They are creating climate action plans and setting clean energy targets to improve the health, economy, and well-being of their residents. Solar App Plus can help cities and towns realize those clean energy goals. Now, with Solar App Plus, building departments can manage solar growth, revise codes, and new technologies all in one platform. To achieve our shared goals, we have a hill to climb together. While the cost of solar energy systems have fallen and solar electricity has become significantly more affordable for Americans, U.S. homeowners still pay more and wait longer for their solar than in any other solar leading country. Lowering the cost of solar energy is essential to accelerating deployment and achieving the country's goal of 100% clean electricity grid by 2035. To achieve that, solar would need to supply 30 to 50% of our nation's electricity, up from just 3% today. To get there, we need to play catch up. We need to make solar deployment faster so we can deploy 2 to 5 times more solar each year than we've been deploying the last several years. So how do we accelerate deployment? That is where permitting, installation, inspection, and interconnection come in. If we can, safely and effectively speeding up those times, taking a process that can take weeks or months to a matter of days, we can break down barriers to rooftop solar adoption and ensure that all Americans benefit from the transition to a clean energy economy. Given conversations we've had with hundreds of jurisdictions, rooftop solar projects are fairly consistent and common. Projects typically have one module and one inverter, and often take no more than an hour to review and are easy to approve. But because of the sheer volume of applications, they often sit in a queue before they get reviewed. Solar App Plus can cover 80 to 90% of the permits submitted for solar, and approve them without any delay. Here's a snapshot of the systems that are currently compatible with Solar App Plus. Projects must follow requirements outlined in our online eligibility checklist to utilize the platform for automated project approval. Currently, Solar App Plus is focused on residential PV and is compatible with the 2017 NEC, 2018 IBC IRC, as well as Title 24 in California. Updates are underway to accommodate jurisdictions that utilize the 2020 NEC. As additional code updates are made, such as the 2021 I-codes and 2023 NEC, these will also be incorporated as options for jurisdictions to select. In the future, Solar App Plus will be able to approve for applications for residential storage systems, main panel upgrades, EV chargers, and more. At a very high level, this is how Solar App Plus works. First, a contractor submits an application into the Solar App Plus portal. The installer spends about 15 minutes moving through fire, structural, electrical, and workers' comp questions. There's about 50 in total. Because it's an automated check, Solar App Plus can very quickly catch code issues, typos, errors, and because it's responsive, it's able to return corrections and provide guidance for getting that answer correct. Once the contractor completes a compliant application, they will pay the Solar App Plus administrative fee, which is currently $25, and they also have the opportunity to pay your permitting fee. Once payment is complete, the permit is instantly issued with the inspection checklist and other content for your inspection team to verify in the field. Solar App Plus is adaptable. We currently offer two options to best meet the needs of different jurisdictions. The first of which is the standalone model. This is for jurisdictions who only accept applications via email, mail, or in person. As you can see on the slide, it starts with the installer inputting their project and paying the permitting and administrative fees. Then, approval documents are sent to both the installer and the jurisdiction. They are also stored in Solar App Plus for easy future access. And finally, the permit gets issued instantly. All permit and inspection documents are sent to both the installer and the jurisdiction. The second option is called the integration model, which is for jurisdictions who already use some type of online permitting portal such as Acela, OpenGov, or Tyler Energov. This method also starts with the installer inputting their project and paying the administrative fee. Then, approval documents are sent to both the installer and the jurisdiction. They are also stored in Solar App Plus for easy future access. The installer would now be directed back to your system where they can pay their permitting fee and upload all Solar App Plus approval documentation. Your system would then instantly issue the permit. Implementing Solar App Plus in your community is easy. First, we would need to select the right model of Solar App Plus, either integration or standalone, which I reviewed on the previous slide. The next step would be to input local settings unique to your jurisdiction. These include wind, snow load, and temperature variables, as well as model code years. Next would be to set up an instant workflow. With the standalone model, this would include setting up permit payments in Solar App Plus through a Stripe account, a trusted payment processing software. For the integration model, this would involve setting up an instant workflow in an existing permitting software environment, such as Acela. And finally, launch. Solar App Plus is open for business and ready for contractors to use.
I want to start by mentioning that Solar App Plus is used in place of submitting plan sets. So Solar App Plus has no plan sets or line diagrams required as part of our permit approval process. Instead, the installer answers questions to satisfy the needs that those plans would otherwise serve. And our review is done completely in the system, so there is no human review involved. That is, until the inspection takes place in the field. As soon as an installer is ready, they can select New Project, where they are prompted to select the authority having jurisdiction, the project type, and enter the address. That address can now be verified automatically by our system. If the installer enters any information that does not align, for example, they enter an address outside of the jurisdiction, Solar App Plus will not allow them to proceed. Next, they'd begin by entering details of the project on Solar App. Here, I'm going to show you a project that has already been created in our system. Most importantly on this page is the eligibility checklist. An installer would review the eligibility checklist to make sure their project qualifies for Solar App Plus. As you can see in this page, our eligibility checklist, we do not have a kilowatt limitation for Solar App Plus, but instead we limit the amps of service, service disconnect, and bus bars. If the installer does not check the necessary attestations, they will not be able to move forward to the next page. We also require an attestation that the project meets the 2017 NEC, 2018 IBC. We will very soon be eligible with the 2020 NEC. People frequently ask, so I do want to mention that Solar App Plus does meet the requirements set by California's Title 24 Building Safety Code. On the next page, the installer will enter information about fire safety. As you can see, there are only two questions here: whether or not the home has sprinklers, and the square footage of the roof. These questions are important to our back-end calculations. The other key piece of information on this page is that the installer must attest to comply with our fire bulletin. This document covers signage, disconnecting means, and importantly, fire setbacks. The fire bulletin covers setback scenarios, and using the square footage of the roof, as well as the internal data for coverage of the selected array on the next page, Solar App will be able to make calculations to ensure that the system can allow for appropriate setbacks. That information will be displayed in the long form and checklist documents, which we will go over later. On the front end, this page seems very simple, but behind the scenes, our reference document and our calculations are very comprehensive. This means that the first time a contractor uses Solar App, they will need to take the time to thoroughly review our fire bulletin, but once they have an understanding, they can move through this process with ease on future projects. Next is the structural page. These questions are designed to ensure that the PV system doesn't pose more than a minimal impact to the home structure. The first and most critical question here is the question about the weight of the system. We often receive concerns about older housing stock in certain jurisdictions, but with Solar App Plus, anything above 4 pounds per square foot generally does not qualify. That means a 30 pound per square foot live load, or able for people to walk on, is being replaced by a 4 pound per square foot dead load, meaning the PV system itself, which cannot be walked on. We also have questions on this page about flush mount systems, which must be less than 10 inches, and tilt-up systems, which has a limitation of 24 inches from the surface. As I scroll down, you can see here these questions referring to snow load and wind speed. These questions are customizable to the climate in your jurisdiction. From here, I will pass it over to one of our team's engineers to review the electrical page.
On the electrical side, knowing that projects would be skipping human review, the Solar App team sought out methods to ensure data consistency and accuracy whenever possible. As such, Solar App references the California Energy Commission's list of approved equipment to verify listing to safety standards by product and obtain the electrical parameters used for code compliance calculations. The first step for contractors on the electrical page is to select the manufacturer and model number of equipment from a drop-down list. Exact model numbers are required for both inverters and modules. Contractors are allowed to select up to 2 distinct inverter models, as long as they employ the same circuit architecture. However, a contractor must choose a single module, racking equipment, and rapid shutdown type for the system. Data sheets for components used will be uploaded and attached to the approval documents for reference by the AHJ. Contractors will upload data sheets to Solar App for reference at inspection. For racking systems, data sheets will support the listing to UL 2703 for integrated grounding and bonding in combination with the PROS module. For rapid shutdown devices, data sheets shall support the listing to UL 1741 and perform either the inside the array boundary, outside the array boundary, or both provisions of the applicable code section. Similar to other expedited permitting processes, the Solar App set minimum guidelines for installation materials and best practices. This allows Solar App to set a base for performing system calculations accurately. The installation details section highlights the requirements for minimum terminal rating, wire ratings, conduit height, and conductor diameter. These values allow the software to calculate and verify wire size, conduit fill, overcurrent protective device ratings, and string voltages per the electrical code. SolarApp is currently unable to evaluate an existing PV system installed on a residence, but we hope to correct this in a future revision of the software. For the circuit details section, the contractor is asked several questions regarding design and architecture of the proposed system. SolarApp employs a worst-case scenario technique to validate electrical parameters, where system conductors are evaluated using the highest available currents and voltages within the system. For example, the longest string of modules connected to a DC string inverter will be used to determine the size of DC conductors for all branches of modules on the roof for that inverter. Branch circuit conductors are evaluated for temperature ampacity and conduit fill D rates. Where other guidebook programs fell short, SolarApp has significant advances in that it can be dynamically configured based on the answer to certain questions. All of the code-compliant interconnections listed in the electrical code can be verified through the SolarApp by varying the question set and evaluating the data. Contractors can choose from several supply-side connections, including taps and meter adapters. For load-side interconnections, the SolarApp evaluates the 120% rule, the 100% rule, and a number of other interconnection options. Each question has been limited to a certain range of acceptable answers and entries that are outside of the range will be deemed not compatible with SolarApp. However, upon completing the questionnaire, the SolarApp evaluates the answers to all questions in aggregate and determines if the system is code compliant. Non-code compliant systems will alert the contractor of an issue that must be corrected in order to complete the process and obtain a permit.
This next page is focused on workers' comp. The installer must warrant that they will perform all of the work with valid approvals, certifications, and licenses, and that they will carry all necessary insurance required by law. This page can be adjusted to match your jurisdiction's specific requirements. Once this has been attested to, the project can be submitted. As the dial spins, our system is doing back-end calculations to ensure that the system as a whole is code compliant. If an installer has input a compliant project, they'll get to preview their inspection checklist, long form, and all of the documents they uploaded. Their next step is to complete payment. At this point, the installer must pay SolarApp's $25 administrative fee. This fee is how we are able to offer SolarApp Plus to jurisdictions at no cost. The fee also enables SolarApp Plus to keep up to date on code as well as new technologies. If your jurisdiction is utilizing the standalone version of SolarApp Plus, a contractor would also be able to pay your permit fee at this point. That payment would be made using a Stripe account set up specifically to your jurisdiction. This means that SolarApp does not touch that permit fee at any point. Instead, it goes directly to your jurisdiction's bank account. Once payment is complete, the contractor will have access to their final approval documents. These documents are emailed both to the installer and your jurisdiction, so you both have access. In the integration method, the installer would then upload these documents into your portal to receive their permit.
The approval documents were drafted with the scope and experience level of a combination inspector in mind and detail the pertinent verifications that the inspector must perform in order to validate the SolarApp approval. The inspection checklist will guide the inspector from the point of interconnection all the way up to the modules on the roof, listing wire size, conduit fill, overcurrent protective device ratings, and rooftop fire access pathway requirements. The inspector will check off items that pass inspection and issue corrections for those that do not. Several items on the checklist direct the inspector to verify manufacturer and model numbers of equipment, validate ampere ratings, observe working clearances and pathways, and identify areas of safety concern. The successful contractor will ensure that the installation matches the parameters on the most current inspection checklist. Deviations at the time of inspection will result in a failed project. Changes to the plan, entered by the contractor after the first submission, will be tracked through a unique revision identifier and can be downloaded from the Solar app via a QR code within the document. Contractors are allowed 3 free revisions for each project. Subsequent revisions will incur added cost to the contractor.
Thank you for taking the time to learn more about Solar App Plus. If you are interested in registering, you can visit the links displayed on this page. If you have remaining questions after this demonstration, we encourage you to access our knowledge base or email us at team@solar-app.org. Thank you.